I never thought my life would turn into a battle for control, but here we are. My name's Emma, and I'm about to tell you how my stepmom completely took over my family, and how I made sure she'd never forget who I was. It all started when my dad remarried. I wasn't thrilled at first, but it was just the two of us for a long time, so I was protective of our little world. But then she came along, Rachel. She was charming, kind at first, and I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. Dad seemed so happy, and I didn't want to ruin it for him. I thought, if she makes him happy, I can make this work. But that was before I saw the cracks in her act. At first, everything seemed fine. Rachel would come over for dinners, join us for family outings. She seemed to genuinely care about me, always asking how school was going or if I needed anything. But the moment they moved in together, I started feeling like a guest in my own home. It wasn't even a subtle change at first. It was like one day I woke up and suddenly, my dad wasn't the person I could talk to anymore. He wasn't the dad I grew up with, he was her husband. And I was just the kid. I noticed it more when I started to feel excluded. The little things like her sitting next to him during family dinners, how she'd organize the house like it was hers, or how she'd suddenly decide what I should wear, what I should do. It wasn't just that she was taking over the house, it was like she was trying to erase me from it altogether. At first, I brushed it off. She was just trying to be a good stepmom, right? But it wasn't just that. The worst part was when Dad started defending her. When I'd try to talk about how I felt left out or how she was crossing boundaries, he'd shut me down. Rachel's just trying to help, Emma. You need to let go a little. I tried. Believe me, I tried to make it work, but it was like no matter what I did, I was the problem. It didn't help that Rachel was so good at playing the victim. She'd feign hurt whenever I called her out, making me look like the bad guy. Dad would lecture me for hours about how I wasn't being understanding. But everything changed when I found out something that left me in absolute shock. I always assumed my dad had the final say in everything, that his decisions were what mattered. But that day, when I found that file, hidden deep in the study drawer, where I'd never think to look, I discovered something that would flip everything I knew about my family upside down. It wasn't just Rachel getting more control. It was the fact that she was already planning to take everything. And I wasn't going to let that happen. It was just me and my dad. I know that sounds like the perfect setup for a cheesy sitcom, but it was our reality. My mom left when I was young, and my dad raised me with a mix of love and a few awkward dad moments. But that was enough for me. We had our little routines, our inside jokes, and even though we had our struggles, I never questioned that I was his priority. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but I never doubted that my dad loved me. Sure, I had a few friends at school, but my real world revolved around my dad. He was my rock, my guide, and the one person I could rely on. When things got tough, we'd lean on each other. He wasn't just a father figure, he was my best friend. But things started to shift after he met Rachel. I remember the first time they introduced her to me. It was awkward, like, terribly awkward, but my dad was so happy, so eager for me to meet her. He wanted me to like her. He wanted us to become this big, perfect family, and I wanted to make him happy, so I tried. I really did. At first, it felt like just a small change. Rachel would come over for dinner a few times a week, and there were some weird vibes at first. It wasn't even that I disliked her, but it felt like she was intruding on something that had always been mine, my dad's attention, our little family dynamic. But I kept telling myself it was all normal, that she was just a temporary addition. I had nothing to fear. Then they started talking about moving in together. That's when I started to feel the panic set in. I tried to tell myself it was fine, that maybe we could adjust, but deep down I knew things wouldn't be the same. My dad was never going to be the same again. It wasn't just the moving in part, it was the way he started changing, too. Little by little, I saw him slip away from me. It wasn't that he stopped loving me. It was that Rachel had become his priority. Slowly, she became the one he talked to about everything. I remember one night, We were sitting on the couch together, just the two of us, like we used to, and he mentioned how Rachel was thinking of redecorating the house. The house. Our house. I laughed it off, thinking it was just a passing idea. But a few weeks later, I came home from school to see the living room completely rearranged. It felt wrong. It wasn't just the furniture, everything had changed. Even the family pictures that used to hang on the walls were taken down, replaced by photos of them together. At first, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. It felt so petty. But then, it kept happening. Rachel began making all the decisions: where I could go, what time I had to be home, what I was allowed to eat. It felt like I wasn't even a member of the family anymore. Every little thing I did was met with a judgmental stare or a condescending comment. It was like she was taking over my life, one small change at a time, and I wasn't sure how to stop it. I started to notice other things too. Like how my dad would defend her even when she was being unfair. He'd turn on me for the smallest things, like leaving dishes in the sink or not helping around the house enough. Yet, when Rachel would do the same things, it was no big deal. She was always right. I was always wrong. One night, I snapped. We were having dinner, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I confronted my dad about how things were changing, how I was being pushed aside, how Rachel was taking over my life. I expected him to stand up for me, to say something, anything, but instead, he just gave me that look. The one that made it clear I was being unreasonable. "Emma, Rachel is trying to help. You need to let go of the past and accept that we're a family now." His words stung more than they should have. It wasn't about being part of a family. It was about feeling like I didn't even exist in my own home anymore. But it wasn't until I found that file, hidden away, tucked behind a stack of old papers in my dad's study, that everything clicked into place. That's when I found the truth. The one thing Rachel hadn't counted on. The file was a simple manila folder, nothing particularly eye-catching. But as soon as I opened it, I felt like I had been hit with a ton of bricks. The first few pages were tax records, boring, normal stuff that anyone with a house would deal with. But then I saw something that made my heart race. It was a series of documents regarding a change in the ownership of the house. At first, I thought I was misreading it. It didn't make sense. My dad had always been clear, this house was ours. My mom might have left us when I was young, but the house had been my dad's legacy, something he had worked hard for to give me a stable life. But there it was in black and white, a legal transfer of property. The name on the deed wasn't my dad's. It was Rachel's. I felt the blood drain from my face as I read through the rest of the papers. There was no mistake. Rachel had been planning to take full ownership of the house, and my dad had signed over everything to her months ago. She wasn't just planning on living here, she was planning on taking over everything that had ever been mine. I couldn't understand it. How had this happened? Why hadn't my dad told me? The thought of Rachel secretly maneuvering behind my back, making plans to completely erase me from my own home, made my stomach turn. But then it hit me, this wasn't just about the house. This was bigger than that. Rachel wasn't just trying to push me out of my family, she was trying to take everything from me, even my place in it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, piecing everything together. All the times I'd been ignored. All the little comments she'd made about making the house more her own. All the ways she'd taken control of my life and my dad's attention. It wasn't a coincidence. It was all part of her plan. I knew that I couldn't just sit back and let her get away with this. I had to take action. I started thinking about all the things I could do, what I could say to my dad, how I could expose Rachel's lies. But then I realized something, this wasn't about a confrontation. This wasn't about shouting matches or begging for my place back. I was going to make her regret ever thinking she could take what was mine. I began by quietly observing. I paid close attention to every interaction between Rachel and my dad. I listened in on their conversations, picked up on the things they said when they thought I wasn't around. What I found only made my blood boil. Rachel was so confident, so sure that she had one. She'd drop little hints, bragging about how she'd helped my dad with the paperwork, or how she was making decisions for the family now. It was as if she thought no one would ever question her. But I was watching. And I was planning. The more I learned, the more I understood how deep her manipulation ran. She wasn't just after the house. She wanted total control of my dad's life, his finances, his decisions, even his will. And she thought she had it all. She had my dad wrapped around her finger, convinced that everything she did was for the best. She thought I was too young, too naive, to see through her act. But I wasn't stupid. I had a plan now. I started gathering evidence, little pieces here and there. I found emails between Rachel and my dad's lawyer, conversations about changing the will, all kinds of documents that proved Rachel was setting herself up to be the sole beneficiary of everything. I knew that I couldn't just expose her right away. I had to wait for the perfect moment. As I gathered the pieces of the puzzle, I began to feel more powerful. I wasn't the victim anymore. I wasn't going to be the one left in the dust while Rachel took everything from me. No, this time, I was the one who was going to come out on top. But the more I discovered, the more I realized something else, too. This wasn't just about me anymore. If I wanted to teach Rachel a lesson she'd never forget, I had to make sure that everyone saw the truth. I couldn't let her continue pretending to be the perfect stepmom, the selfless woman who'd saved my dad. I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who she was, and what she had done. The stakes were higher than ever, and the plan was falling into place. Rachel had no idea what was coming. The time had come. For weeks, I'd quietly observed, collected evidence, and carefully crafted my plan. Rachel thought she was untouchable, that no one would ever question her role in the family. She thought I was too weak, too passive, to ever stand up to her. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I had gathered everything I needed, and now it was time to pull the rug out from under her. The moment of reckoning came one evening, when my dad was out on one of his frequent business trips. I'd noticed how Rachel often liked to play the hostess when he wasn't around, making decisions for the household like she was the queen of the castle. But tonight, she was about to learn that she wasn't the only one with power. I called up a few close family members, people who still had a soft spot for me and who had seen the way Rachel had slowly pushed me aside. They agreed to come over that evening, though none of them knew the full extent of what I'd uncovered. I needed an audience, someone to witness the truth of what had been happening behind closed doors. I made sure everything was in place. The documents, the emails, the proof of Rachel's underhanded actions, everything was ready. I had the perfect setup, and all I had to do was push her into the corner, where she couldn't deny the truth any longer. That evening, Rachel was acting extra sweet, pretending like nothing was wrong. She greeted me with a smile, asking how my day was, trying to act as though nothing had changed. But I could see the way she watched me, the way she was trying to gauge how much I knew. It was almost like she could feel the tension in the air, but she didn't know the bomb was about to go off. I invited my family members in, as casually as if it were a regular dinner. They gathered around the living room, small talk filling the space. I waited until we were all seated, the tension in the air almost palpable. Rachel, sitting across from me, looked like she was ready for another one of her charming performances. But this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. "Rachel," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I think it's time we had a little conversation." She raised an eyebrow, but I could see the nervousness creeping into her expression. "What do you mean?" I didn't waste any time. I pulled out the manila folder, the one that had started it all, and placed it on the coffee table. Slowly, I opened it and began to read aloud. I found these documents hidden in Dad's study. They're about the house, the one that's always been in our family. And guess what? It looks like you've made sure you're the sole owner of it now. I also found these emails between you and Dad's lawyer about changes to his will. Changes you've been making behind my back. Rachel's face went pale. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The room was silent, except for the sound of paper rustling as I continued to expose her lies. I watched as Rachel's facade cracked, the cool, calm exterior giving way to panic. She tried to speak, but every excuse she made just sounded weaker and weaker. "No, Emma, that's not what you think. You don't understand. I've just been trying to help," she stammered, but I wasn't having it. "Help?" I interrupted, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Is that what you call it? Taking everything that belongs to me, pushing me out of my own home, all while pretending to be the loving stepmom? That's not help. That's manipulation." Her eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for someone to back her up, but my family members were silent, watching the scene unfold with a mix of shock and disbelief. Rachel turned to them, trying to play the victim. "You have to believe me," she said, her voice shaking. "I did everything for him. I was just trying to make things better. This is all a mistake, a misunderstanding." But no one was buying it. They'd all seen the changes, the way she'd wormed her way into every corner of our lives, and they weren't about to let her get away with it. My dad's brother, Uncle Paul, who had always been a bit suspicious of Rachel, spoke up first. "Emma's right. You've been crossing boundaries for months now. And if this is true," he glanced at the papers, "you've been taking advantage of him." Rachel's face twisted, her grip tightening on the edge of the couch as she looked around the room. The walls were closing in. She knew she was done. "You can't do this," she shouted, finally breaking. "I love him. I love your dad, and I'm just trying to help." "Help?" I repeated, my voice rising now, filled with raw emotion. "No. You've been plotting. You've been trying to erase me. You thought I wouldn't figure it out, but I did." Her eyes filled with anger, but there was fear behind it too. She knew she had lost. Her carefully constructed world was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control over something. I had exposed the truth. I had shown everyone what Rachel was really capable of. And in that moment, I knew my revenge was complete. Rachel tried to storm out, but my uncle stopped her at the door. "You're not going anywhere. You're going to answer for this," he said. I could see her face collapse, her arrogance replaced by defeat. She knew she had lost everything. Her plans, her control, gone. The fallout from that night was swift and brutal. The truth was out, and Rachel had nowhere to hide. My dad came home a few days later, looking confused and weary, but when he saw the state of things, he knew something had gone terribly wrong. I explained everything to him, the documents, the emails, the lies. At first, he was in shock. He couldn't believe that Rachel had gone this far. But there was no denying the evidence, and slowly, reality began to settle in. He had been blind to what she had been doing. He had trusted her completely, but now, all he could feel was regret. For the first time, I saw my dad truly angry. He didn't raise his voice, but the disappointment in his eyes spoke volumes. He turned to Rachel and said, "I thought I knew you. I thought you were someone I could trust. But I see now that I was wrong. You're not the person I thought you were." Rachel tried to plead with him, but it was too late. Her act had crumbled, and there was nothing left for her to hold on to. The house, her supposed prize, was still legally in her name, but that would change. My dad immediately consulted a lawyer to undo the paperwork and revoke any changes she had made to his will. It was a messy process, but it didn't matter. Rachel had lost. As for Rachel, she tried to make a few half-hearted attempts to fix things, showing up at the house with apologies and promises that she would do better. But my dad wasn't having it. It was clear to everyone that she had only ever been in this for herself. She was no longer welcome in our home, and when the dust settled, she was left with nothing but her lies and shattered pride. She left that same week, packed up her things, and disappeared from our lives as quietly as she had entered. The family was shaken, but over time, things started to settle. My dad and I had long, honest conversations about everything that had happened. We worked through the betrayal, and though it would take time, we were able to rebuild the trust that had been broken. Rachel's absence left a hole in our lives, but it also created a space for something new. My dad and I grew closer than we had ever been before. We spent more time together, and I didn't feel like I had to compete for his attention anymore. There was no one else trying to manipulate him, to control him. I had my dad back. As for Rachel, I heard through the grapevine that she had tried to find another man to latch onto after everything with my dad fell apart. But she was never able to get as far as she did with him. No one trusted her. No one wanted to be the next victim of her charm and deceit. She became a ghost, someone people remembered but didn't want to deal with. In the end, I won. Not just the house, not just the family. I won my dignity back. I took control of my own life again. Rachel thought she could break me, make me feel small, but in the end, she was the one who had been broken. And as for me, I never looked back. The pain of that betrayal lingered for a while, but I refused to let it define me. I learned a valuable lesson: never underestimate the power of knowing your worth. And never let anyone take away what belongs to you. The last thing I ever heard about Rachel was that she'd moved on to her next victim, her next plan. But as for me, I was free. Free from her lies, free from the manipulation, and free from the shadow she'd cast over my life. And I'd make sure no one ever forgot who I was, because I wasn't going to let anyone forget again.